Not even in the wildest version of this Lions turnaround I've carried in my head did I expect to sit here tonight and tell you that a former Super Bowl champion quarterback on a low, movable deal in New York might, quietly and logically, be drifting into Detroit's orbit as a move serious teams at the top at least have to talk about. This is Lions News Fan Report. I'm talking directly to you, one-on-one, and in this video, I'm going to break down what's really happening with Russell Wilson and the Giants, why his current situation has turned him into one of the cheapest, experienced quarterbacks on the market, how that lines up with the Lions' window, culture, and cap, and what it would actually mean for our season, our locker room, and our long-term plan if Detroit decided to get involved. No fake done deal, no empty hype, just a full, honest look that gets more interesting the deeper we go. We start in Detroit because this conversation only exists if we respect what this team has built. The Lions are not a feel-good underdog anymore. They are operating on a contender timeline. There is a clear offensive identity from the line to the backs to the receivers. There is a leadership core that drives standards every week. There is a front office that has earned trust by drafting well, extending the right guys, and refusing to panic. You don't blow that structure up for a big name whose prime is gone. You don't touch the heart of this project lightly. Any link between Russell Wilson and the Lions has to pass one test. Does it help this team win and survive a long season without damaging what already works? Now flip to New York. Wilson arrived to the Giants with pedigree and expectation, but the reality on the field has pushed him into a different category. Limited production, reduced mobility, a quick move to the bench in favor of a younger option. All of that has changed how the league views him. At this point, most evaluators see him not as a franchise face, but as a veteran number 2 with a trade-friendly base salary. Someone you can acquire without giving up premium picks and fit under a tight cap. That combination of experience plus affordability is rare at quarterback, and every time a guy like that falls out of a starting job on a short-term deal, contenders take notice, whether they say it publicly or not. Because when you're chasing January football, your quarterback room cannot be a hope nothing happens plan. You need layers. You need someone behind your starter who can step in and actually run an offense, control protections, manage situations, and keep your season alive for 3 or 4 games if something goes wrong. You also need someone who doesn't shake the culture that Dan Campbell and this locker room have built. Tough, accountable, team first. Wilson at this age and this stage is no longer the let-me-cook freelancer who wants the whole brand. What he still brings is preparation, film obsession, huddle experience, and the memory of big game moments. For a team like the Lions, that profile is less about chasing what he was and more about using what he still is. This is where the idea stops being pure fantasy. Around the league, he's been mentioned on short lists of possible trade candidates with a low likelihood tag, mostly because there are not many starting jobs open and nobody wants to overpay. But for a real contender, that reluctance is an opportunity. While some front offices ask, is he still a top 10 guy? Serious ones ask a different question. If we can get him cheap, does he make us safer, smarter, and more stable if QB1 misses time? That is exactly the type of calculation that has turned backup quarterbacks into season savers in recent years. With Wilson's current contract structure and declining market, the price to find out would be more reasonable than it has been at any point in his career. I'm not here to tell you he walks into Allen Park and takes over this team. That's not the point. The point is whether adding him as a clearly defined backup could give Detroit one of the strongest quarterback rooms in the conference. The scheme here is friendly to veteran quarterbacks who can operate on time. Strong run game, heavy play action, defined reads, weapons who separate. You don't need backyard magic on every snap. You need competence and trust. Even during his struggles in New York, you still see flashes of touch at the intermediate and deep levels, timing routes that work when the structure holds, an understanding of protections. If you drop that version of Russell into a better environment and limit his role, he becomes something very different from the player people are tired of debating. He becomes insurance. Of course, there's the concern about noise. A former superstar in your building can attract cameras, headlines, questions about roles. That's where culture matters more than names. This Lions group is strong enough that nobody walks in and rewrites the identity. Any serious conversation about Wilson in Detroit is built on one non-negotiable. He accepts the job description: compete, prepare, mentor, be ready, and respect the hierarchy. From his side, at this point, that might be exactly what he needs too. A mature, competitive context where he's not framed as the savior, but as a pro who helps a real contender stay on track. Financially, it's one of the rare times in his career where an acquisition wouldn't wreck your planning. You're not touching cornerstone pieces, you're not shipping away high draft capital, you're not locking yourself into a multi-year mistake. You're making a short-term, controlled bet at a position where one bad Sunday can ruin a year. That's the kind of edge smart teams look for at the deadline or in late window talks, a small move that could deliver huge protection for your season. On the field, the fit is more realistic than people think. In this offense, a backup's job is to keep the structure alive, hit the play action, use the backs, trust your route runners, take what the coverage gives, and avoid the catastrophic mistake. He can still do those stays and stretches. You're no longer building around his off-script brilliance. You're asking him to run the menu. With his experience in high-leverage situations, that's a reasonable expectation in the right setup. Pair that with a staff that communicates clearly, and suddenly he looks less like a risk and more like a stabilizing tool. So, does that mean the Lions are about to pull the trigger? No. Right now, there is no official move, no agreement, no leak that turns this into a confirmed storyline. What exists is a logical lane where, if the Giants truly decide they're done with him and the cost is minimal, Detroit is one of the few destinations that checks all the boxes. Contender status, strong culture, clear starter, need for top-tier insurance, and a front office that understands value. That's why this possibility sits in the background, not as a headline to scream, but as an option serious people can't completely dismiss. Before we close, I want you in this discussion. Tell me below, as someone who survived the dark years and now expects championship behavior, would you be comfortable bringing in Russell Wilson as a cheap veteran backup to protect this window? Or do you see any move in that direction as an unnecessary shake to the chemistry and trust in the current room? Your view matters because this fan base finally thinks like a big organization, and the people upstairs feel that. My direct take is simple and professional. If the numbers stay low, the role is crystal clear, and the staff is convinced he buys into being QB2, then exploring Russell Wilson to Detroit is the kind of calculated, grown-up decision a real contender makes to guard its investment. If any of those conditions fail, if the price creeps up, if there's ego, if it becomes more distraction than protection, then saying no is just as strong a decision and just as aligned with who the Lions are now. Either way, the fact that we can break this down as a serious football conversation, not a fantasy, is proof of how far this franchise has come. If you appreciate getting this level of context instead of empty noise, hit like, subscribe to Lions News Fan Report, turn on your notifications, and share this video with that friend who still talks about the old Lions. Here you'll keep getting fast updates, deep analysis, and honest conversations about every move that can shape this team's future at the top.